This episode is sponsored by Midlock Investment Partners, the real estate investment firm, operator, and fund manager. Midlock invests in middle market properties valued between $5 and $50 million in the Midwest and beyond, using a value add strategy. Learn more about Midlock and join their mailing list at midlock.com. That's Midlock, MIDLOCH.com. Thanks, Midlock, for being a sponsor of Passive Investing from Left Field.
People will be familiar with what cherry fruit looks like, right? Coffee grows in the same format. You extract the bean, all that cherry is left over. Usually it becomes a toxin, a pollutant. People throw it in the water. It's packed with sugars, fibers, proteins. So we've always said, what can we do with that to turn it into an actual product?
Hello, Left Fielders. Welcome to the Passive Investing from Left Field podcast. Our community is focused on networking and education to help people invest passively and think differently. Let's go.
Hi, this is Tom Wheelwright, and you're listening to Passive Investing from Left Field podcast.
Hello, this is Chad Ackerman, and you are listening to the Passive Investing from Left Field podcast. Today, I'd like to welcome our guest, Adam Jason with the Green Coffee Company and Legacy Group to the podcast. I appreciate you joining me today, Adam. Welcome.
Yeah, Chad, thanks for the opportunity. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So we always like to start these out with the easy stuff and just tell us a little bit about your journey and kind of where you got started and how you ended up in the space that you're in today.
Sure. Yeah, maybe I'll start my journey from where I am now and work backwards a little bit. I'm talking to you today from Medellin, Colombia, so I'm in South America. Crazy enough to say I've been down here 6 years now, came down in January 2018. Past life, I was an attorney by trade, practiced in corporate finance, capital markets back in the US for about 8 years. Really working for Fortune 500 clients, Wall Street banks, raising money, taking companies public. Found kind of my entrepreneurial path with the things that we're doing down here in Colombia with the Green Coffee Company and some of the other investments that we're making. But originally from Buffalo, New York, born and bred in the U.S. and took the overseas journey here in the last couple of years, and excited about the years ahead.
Yeah. So attorney flipped to syndicator. What sparked the bug to do that? What got you on that? That's what our listeners, everybody's got their story. I always like to pull on the story a little bit to hear what might ring through with one of the listeners as well.
Absolutely. So big law firm world in the U.S., traditional path to partnership is usually 7 to 10 years. I was right about that point in my career where you kind of make the decision of, do you stick around the law firm and become a partner? Do you go in-house to one of your clients and work there as general counsel or in-house legal role? Or do you do something more entrepreneurial? And I kind of had that itch towards the latter. I was in Dallas at the time working for a law firm there, got an offer, to join a firm down in Houston. Had a month between the two positions. Decided to do some traveling, which I'd never really done much of in my earlier life. Pretty traditional, school all the way through, start your career, pretty middle class upbringing. We weren't doing a lot of European vacations growing up. So had some kind of actual free time for the first time in a long time. Had heard good things about Colombia, South America. Wanted to come down here and spend a little time and also pick a place where I thought I could kind of have the experience of living for a month versus, travel, move around every couple of days, pack the bags up, shift to something else. Saw some good opportunities down here in terms of real estate, opportunities in the market. My now business partner down here really kind of saw but not only a potential new place to live and kind of challenge myself a little bit, but also business opportunities that would actually give me something, fruitful to be doing. So ended up going back to the U.S. after that vacation, practiced for about 10 months more at the firm down in Houston, and just kind of that whole time had the itch. My business partner down here in Colombia was starting the Green Coffee Company at the time and needed help with the initial capital raise, mainly on the legal side. Some strategy, but mainly on the legal side. Because of that connection down here, my experience as a capital markets corporate finance attorney back in the U.S. We're raising money to start the business from U.S. high net worth investors, accredited investors. So whether the business is functioning in Colombia or the U.S., if you're talking to U.S. investors, the same rules apply. So was working on the initial capital raise for the business while I was back in the U.S. And then late 2017, saw the writing on the wall, wanted to do something different, started selling all my stuff, slept on an air mattress for a couple months, and then came down here full time with a suitcase.
Oh, nice. 6 years
Yeah,
later, you're still here, huh?
still
So,
here, still here.
yeah. It must be okay then down there.
It is, it
Yeah.
is.
So let's talk a little bit about the strategy that Green Coffee Company takes towards this whole industry. The
Yep.
coffee industry hasn't changed a lot in the history, probably well, in some time of the coffee industry, but you guys have a slightly different approach. Could you talk about how you guys differ from the norm? What your strategies are that are different from the typical companies?
Yeah, you're accurate to shine light on the fact that the industry really hasn't changed in an extensive period of time, and it's almost shocking. People hear Colombia, they hear coffee, the two are kind of synonymous. You'd think there were big players here who have been buying farms, aggregating assets, developing the market. It's really not the case. We started the business back in 2017. Just a few years ago, just a few years really into the journey, we became the largest producer here in the country. So now we have over 10,000 acres, about 12 million coffee trees in the portfolio. But yeah, like you said, you'd think that somebody would have already done that and it wouldn't be, a 3-4 year run up and we could be the largest player in the country, but we're able to do it. It's really a fragmented market where 95% of the farmers own 5 acres or less. Lack of international investment, lack of aggregated infrastructure. Most people do their own growing, processing, movement of coffee around the country. There hasn't been that industrialization that you see in a lot of other agricultural industries, especially folks from the U.S. who see how industrialized things like corn and other commodities currently are. The investment just never really came. And we really, the business, it took us a couple of years really to be in the business and see all that kind of opportunity open up and see all of that fragmentation and all that opportunity. So when we started the business, it was really, let's buy some farms, consolidate them, put some consolidated infrastructure, trying to hit a decent scale, get some cash flow going to investors and give them kind of an alternative to commercial real estate. But because of that lack of investment, really the dislocation in the market that we saw, we discovered we were really sitting on a bigger opportunity than we had anticipated when we initially started. So we started raising more capital, hiring more talent, thinking about the business in a bigger way, with really our eyes set on an IPO in the US in 2026 that does big things for our investors.
No, that'd be great. Yeah, that's a great goal to have.
Yes.
What is the difference that Green Coffee Company brought to the table that the big, Nestle or somebody didn't think about? What has prevented them from doing your model that has worked for you guys, do you think?
There hasn't been a huge interest from the big players in actually being farmers, right? They like to buy from the intermediaries. So the traditional setup is the small farmers sell to cooperatives, the cooperatives sell the coffee to exporters, the exporters will sell them to the Nestle's of the world and those folks. But going all the way down to the farm, people really haven't done that. They've let other people kind of do the dirty work. We saw an opportunity to really go from farm all the way to cup and cover the full stretch of the value chain. So we started buying farms. We position ourselves really as a kind of a green coffee commodity sales company, but we continue to see more and more opportunities to be in products that are closer to the end consumer where there's higher margins. So a big push into roasted coffee and then a big push into coffee byproducts, which is really the using all the extra stuff that comes that's not the bean when you go through the process of milling coffee. So this is something I think that's pretty innovative that we've done over the last couple of years and that we're really investing heavily in now is how do we use that as byproduct? So it's really people will be familiar with what cherry fruit looks like, right? Coffee grows in the same format. You extract the bean, all that cherry is left over. Usually it becomes a toxin, a pollutant. People throw it in the water. It's packed with sugars, fibers, proteins. So we've always said, what can we do with that to turn it into an actual product? What we've settled on is creating ethanol and then turning that ethanol into vodkas, gins, etc., and going after the local market. So I'll show you here. Most people think, oh, it's going to taste like coffee or whatever. These are the samples of the gin and the vodka that are coming out of distillery, and this is literally just distilling the sugars that are in those cherries into these products. So it doesn't have a coffee taste or anything like that. It's a pure neutral ethanol, and you can use it as a raw material for these various products. So one of the big things that we're working on right now is building a full-scale distillery here in Colombia that'll have capacity to do about 25,000 of these vodka bottles per day at full capacity. So it's a huge, huge differentiator in the market. Nobody's really focused on it. And a lot of it is due to that lack of investment coming in, people not having the capital needed, or really I'd say like an international perspective on the business to say, yeah, let's do something like this at scale. So fortunately, the opportunity is still there for us, but we need to jump on it and execute.
Yeah. So you guys have almost built like a turnkey process then. You're from farm to table, literally, but in a massive quantity that you're talking about for the size and volume that you really have scaled to already. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's a good way of saying it.
Yeah. So interesting. Talk to me about the challenges, I guess, that you run into operating in Latin America as you're US based company, technically, right?
Yep.
But producing, working, and refining. I think you do everything in Colombia, or do you ship to the US? I forget what the breakdown was, and you do some of the refining up here. I can't remember how you managed it.
Exactly.
But maybe you could speak to those things.
Sure. So like you said, we're based in the U.S., headquartered out of Delaware, with subsidiaries that do all the operations down here in Colombia. Challenges are probably what most people would expect. You got to figure out the culture, have to figure out the language, have to hire the right people, just learn the ins and outs of a new market. But we're fortunate to have enough resources to really bring in the best possible talent that we can to do that. So our management team, and when I speak about the management team, the actual folks who are operating the business on a daily basis, I sit as vice chairman and a member of the board, but our CEO, our COO, these guys are lifelong ag guys here in Colombia, agro-industrial engineers. They know the space, they know it well, they know all the culture and kind of how to manage those things. And myself sit more in kind of the investor facing role and also strategy from the board level on down and working with the management team. But yeah, I mean, it's a learning process, but it also gives us a competitive advantage. If anybody else wants to come down and do what we're doing, it's going to take capital, education, experience, talent scouting, a lot of different things that somebody else is going to have to do to duplicate what we've already done. So despite the challenges, they also kind of create that barrier to entry, which is obviously important as we try and do new things and keep other people away while we're doing it.
No, it sounds like you guys really got ahead of the curve on this one, which is really cool to find yourself in that spot. And I'm assuming we talked about the large company not wanting to scale down to the farm. I assume there aren't any local farm groups or something like that have tried to scale up, because I'm sure the capital that's needed is just way too expensive and everything else too.
What you usually see is people fitting within one specter of the value chain. So they grow coffee, and they're usually small farmers, or maybe they'll do some of the export if you get like into the larger names in the space. But then you'll have the large export companies, importers, and then you have like the Starbucks of the world who are really in the hospitality business more than the coffee business. The Nestle's of the world, and those guys are in the consumer space. So it's just a different, like, where do you insert yourself? Most people pick one entry point, but we think we can add a lot of value by covering the full spectrum and offer a unique product. There's not a lot of farm to cup, traceability, sustainability connected stories out there in the market. And people want to have that story. Consumers now more than ever are pickier than they've traditionally been in the past in terms of what products they like, what companies they want to support. So we want to be able to control the process from everything we do all the way to the farm to the cup of coffee that people drink. That's important to us.
Yeah. How are you guys weathering kind of the current state of the economy, inflation, and everything else that's hitting? My grocery bill gets higher every time I go. My cost to go eat out and have a lunch is getting a lot more expensive. How has that impacted you guys with all the importing you're doing and the space that you're in?
I think agriculture is similar to real estate when you're looking at it from an investor perspective, that as inflation rises, you get to ride the wave of that in terms of pricing. So kind of the underlying value of the land becomes more valuable as you're selling a commodity at a higher price. Of course, as we push further into roasted coffee and consumer products, you have more of a cap. People seem to be a little bit more price conscious than they have been in the past, maybe pushing down into some of the white label products and kind of lower end coffees and those kind of things. But, we're a business that tries to move a lot of high quality product at scale. We're not asking people to pay $20 a pound for coffee. We want to be priced well, whether it's interest rates are 4%, 7%, or 2%. That we don't think should be a consideration for whether somebody wants to drink our coffee.
Yeah, I would say you're not trying to be Folgers and be everywhere.
No,
but you're not trying to be the elite, the high end either. So
that's exactly right. I mean, we got to sell 30 million pounds of coffee at a price point that is accessible to a lot of people, and that's just the starting point. That's our IPO goal for the next couple of years.
Gotcha. Yeah, very good.
Rust Belt Capital is an elite Ohio-based private equity firm with a specialization in long-term, high-cash flow multifamily investments. If you're looking for long-term recurring income, you should check out Rust Belt Capital. From their approach to managing risk, to the locations they invest, the product quality they provide, this firm is serious about what they do, which is why the owners of Rust Belt Capital invest their money in every deal they take on. Review their case studies by visiting rustbeltcapital.com. That's rustbeltcapital.com. Once again, rustbeltcapital.com, or email investor@rustbeltcapital.com.
Visor provides investors with a secure platform that displays a comprehensive view of all of their holdings on a single, holistic dashboard. From real estate syndications to private equity, crypto to traditional investments, with AI-driven, unbiased, honest insights to maximize return, Visor is your one place to rule them all. Automating performance tracking, projecting future cash flow, analyzing all your financial documents, and much more in one powerful solution, making it easy to follow the money. Sign up for a free 30-day trial now at Visor.co.
So to shift gears a little bit, we're a podcast kind of designed for the limited partner investor. Yep. Your asset class is a little bit different than what we typically do with the multifamily, the self-storage.
Sure.
Can you talk about what kind of mistakes you see passive investors make when they're looking at industry like yours, and maybe along with that, the top 2 or 3 metrics that you say really kind of help value the underwriting on your type of deals that investors ought to be looking at as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd say we try from the investor facing side of things. We just try and create a different product. I think that there's a lot of multifamily offerings in the market. It's very hard to differentiate. You just get down to probably, okay, who has the best track record? All the capital goes to those folks, and people have a very hard time differentiating themselves competitively. A piece of real estate in Fort Lauderdale versus, name your surrounding suburb of the Florida area. It's very hard to differentiate. So we try to create a product that's different for folks, that allows them to make that direct placement, allows them to be involved in the private markets, but also gives them a chance to exceed what's likely the return potential on traditional real estate. It's very unlikely that you're going to invest in a syndication and a piece of multifamily property that has the potential to 3, 4, 5x your money, right? And I think a lot of times folks are actually better off just investing in the stock market generally and not having to do all the diligence, not having to vet operators. I think the returns, especially with where interest rates are, can often be very compressed, where you're better off just taking your 30-year historical average on the S&P and not doing any of the work. So we've tried to create a product that's different, that gives people the stability really that comes with real estate, right? The downside protection of being heavily asset focused, having some cash flow to the business, but also a chance to kind of take the lid off and get the public market returns that you would get by taking a company public and building really an enterprise value. So that's how we've tried to separate ourselves from, I think, the offerings that folks usually get, as well as providing, a business that people think is usually pretty cool, that they can easily understand. It's coffee, it's turning coffee byproducts into liquor. People can wrap their heads around that, in a market that's known for coffee and has that position in people's minds. And that's usually pretty exciting to folks. So, and it's exciting to us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's almost, I'm sure it's not exactly, but it's almost a recession-proof product. I mean, if people aren't going to give up their coffee, even if, things turn sour, they still are looking for that, that hit out of the caffeine, if you will, get their coffee connection. So it almost creates a product that, is going to be pretty steadily consumed, I would think, that's easier to plan on.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet against coffee going anywhere.
Right,
it's 2 billion cups of coffee a day consumed globally. The percentages continue to tick up. Different products get introduced into the market. You can see some shifts away from hot coffee into things like RTDs and cold brews and other things. Sure. But, it's maybe you're selling almost a drug,
Yeah, almost.
People have that habit. It's part of their lifestyle. It's going to continue.
At least in the U.S. Yeah, at least in the U.S. I think it's like toilet paper and coffee just are always going to be needed by the U.S. So you're one of the two out of that.
Yeah, and they go hand in hand, ironically.
Conveniently, one feeds the other. It should be dividing into the toilet paper industry.
Yes.
So really, your deals probably underwrite like agricultural deals that we would look at. Then can you maybe speak to the underwriting on this that would help an LP look at your deals a little bit more too?
Yeah, I mean, we really model things on a discounted cash flow analysis and also factoring in kind of price to earnings ratios in the public markets and what we expect to get to in the future, but also maintaining a low valuation for the business now, understanding that whether we think so or not, people are always going to look at Colombia differently than they're going to look at an investment in the U.S., for example, and has to be a corresponding risk premium to account for, call it reality, call it perception, whatever it is, however people look at it. So we try to keep the valuation low so that people can have enough upside where it's interesting to them and it's actually an attractive place for capital versus some of the other options we've already discussed. So our target for our investors, we have a funding round open right now. We started a few months ago with 15 million. We have just under 6 million left. We're trying to get everybody who comes in now a 5x return on their money in a couple of years. And that really comes with putting those pieces of going further down the value chain together, selling tons of roasted coffee at a decent price point and hitting the ground running with the alcohol products. It's not more complicated than that. A lot of execution and things that go into it, but fairly easy to understand. And we think if we get there in a couple of years, we should be doing about 50 million in net income, reasonable 20x price to earnings ratio if we take it public, which is the historical average over the last 50 years for an S&P company. We want to get people big returns, but also have that downside with the assets and kicking off a bunch of cash as well.
Yeah, and you guys are accredited only, or do you do a non-accredited as well?
Yeah, we do accredited only. We're looking for 100K minimum investments. We got 500 folks in the database already, or in the investor group already. We've raised just under 77 million going into the last home stretch of this raise here, and we use really little debt to this point. When we finish this raise, we'll be about 3-to-1 equity to debt. So we're not over leveraging the company. Part of that is due to the capital restraints that exist in Colombia. It's not as liquid of a market as you'd have in the U.S. You have to. It would be the equivalent of buying your home and then lending against it if you were in the U.S. So it's a little bit different. But from a pragmatic standpoint, just being responsible with capital, we also try to keep the debt levels low and grow more organically than putting a bunch of debt against the balance sheet and trying to maximize returns. We want to be responsible as well. So I know that's always a popular question with investors, but yeah, I mean, we're, 75 million of equity and 25 million of debt. So pretty,
That's
pretty
secure.
reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What kind of in that vein, again, from analyzing the deal, this being different than the typical asset classes that we're looking at, what
Yeah.
are the biggest risk factors that people should consider when they're looking at this industry and your products and so forth?
Yeah, I think, whenever you're talking about farming, you have to deal with the weather. So,
Mm.
there's always do you have fluctuations in production? Do you have fluctuations in yield? What happens with the farms? We try to hedge that some by doing a lot of buying in the market as well. So a big way that we feed our production is to purchase coffee, really in the form of those coffee cherries, so we can use kind of all the raw materials from other farmers who surround us. So right now it's about 60-40 in terms of actual buys versus our own production. So a lot of the small farmers, this ties into the sustainability story as well, but also boosts our production. A lot of them are selling us their coffee so that we enhance the production. So if we have dips in our own production, we can buy a little more and kind of fluctuate it that way. And I'd say it's just execution risk, right? Are we doing our job really well? Is the market taking to the gins and vodkas that we're selling here in Colombia? Are we effectively moving coffee in the U.S. and Canada, which are our focus for the roasted coffee? And it's not. I'd say what I like about the business, what I love about the business, is not, are people going to consume the product? Do we have to teach people to drink alcohol? Do we have to teach them to drink coffee? No, it's okay. Can we be great at farming? Can we keep costs down? Can we get the right price point when we're selling the product? Can we shift consumer preferences a little bit from, oh, I want to drink folders, maybe I want to take a step up, or maybe I've been drinking Starbucks forever, but I want to hit a coffee that's a little bit different. The big advantage we have is the 50-year history of the Colombian coffee market advertising to US-based investors and putting the idea in their head, which I actually think is true, that Colombian coffee is the premier coffee in the world. So if you look at what does the consumer in the US buy, if they go to the grocery store and they decide I want a single origin coffee, so single origin meaning, it all comes from Brazil, it all comes from Guatemala, it all comes from Honduras, it all comes from Colombia, 71% of the time, consumers choose the Colombian. So I think we're in the right market to really sell Colombia, be the name that people connect to Colombian coffee, and leverage that consumer knowledge and knowledge base that they already have to really move a lot of coffee.
Did I understand? I didn't clarify this earlier. Forgive me, but the vodka and the gin, is that not distributed outside of Colombia today? Is there plans to take that outside and bring it to the U.S. potentially, or I'm sure that gets kind of regulated and a lot more cumbersome than coffee anyway. But
it is. But really, we see it as strategically, Colombia makes a lot more sense. So if you come to the market here and you go to the liquor store, the cheapest bottle you're going to find is about $20, and it's going to be an import like Absolute or one of the names that you would know. Most of the consumers here, if you look at the broad-based consumer consumption here in Colombia, they're looking for alcohol in the $10 to $12 range for what they're purchasing. Nobody in the vodka or gin space is hitting that price point. We also think that we can really tell a unique story and connect in the consumer's mind, the national product of coffee, a lot of the small farmers selling to us, there's that pride factor, the national pride factor, but also the touch from the pride people have in coffee here to selling a product in the market and kind of being in that price point that nobody else is touching. So from a cost perspective, it's easy for us to hit. We're basically recycling the waste. All the raw material is free because we're just taking we're already using the coffee. So it becomes a question of, how much does the bottle cost? How much does the process cost to put it in a bottle? We're talking about probably $2 all in. So it's very easy for us to sell something for 12 that we're making for 2 and make some good money. So, and we don't, there's just so much competition in the US, not even just in the vodka and gin space, but all kinds of craft cocktails, seltzers, beers. It's just not necessary, especially as a starting point to try and compete in that space. And I don't know that the consumer there would care as much about the story, where it would become an identity brand, versus here where we can really connect it to people's hearts.
Yeah, I think the marketing spin that you have for it, not a spin, it's fact of how you're utilizing more of the coffee plant itself to help preserve waste and, be part of the culture and everything else.
Right.
That makes total sense. I get it. That makes a lot of sense to me. So really interesting how you've found multiple uses inside the same industry that, again, not a lot of other companies have given this thought or come up with this idea. So you guys are really ahead of the curve, it seems like, on a lot of this stuff, which is cool.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, we really just kind of steal ideas from other agriculture industries, right? If you look at corn, they've already made ethanol. Exactly. Everybody uses everything that comes out of the ground, but it's never been done in coffee. So why not do it?
Why not? Yeah, you've already got all the base there, all the chemicals you need. Interesting. Right. Well, cool. Well, last questions we always ask, Adam, is what's a great podcast that you like to listen to? We like to throw that out to give our listeners a variety of things to check out. But any podcasts you like to listen to?
Oh, man. I like talking investing. I like the topics. I like the All In podcast, which is pretty popular right now. Mm-hmm. Listen to a lot of audiobooks. I love it's a little bit off of your question, but I love the kind of going back to the old industrial revolution stories of the Rockefellers and kind of the old tycoons. And I see a lot of parallels to what we're doing now. So maybe that's why it resonates.
You're kind of living that down there, it seems like.
Trying to. Sometimes it feels like it's 150 years ago, but yeah. So that's where I do my listening, cool. I'd say.
Yeah, that's cool. No, that's cool. So, the last thing that I will ask you is we always want to make sure that we know how people can get in touch with you. So what's the best way for people to reach out?
Sure. I'd say for folks who are interested in investing with us, like I said, we got about 6 million left in the raise. Got some big news coming on the branded coffee side, which I think are going to push things forward really quickly. For anybody who knows Colombian coffee, they'll know the name when it comes out here in a couple of weeks. So I think it'll go quickly. So for folks who are interested in joining us, easiest way is to shoot us an email. It's investor.relations@legacy-group.co. Maybe a little long. Maybe you want to throw it in the show notes.
We'll get it in the show notes. Yep.
And then I'm super, if it's easier, people can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm probably the most active. So easy to find there.
Perfect. Well, great. Well, Adam, we really appreciate you coming on today. This is great stuff. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Have a deal in mind and a group of investors ready to go? Use TribeVest to pool your capital together through a multi-member LLC. TribeVest has streamlined the group investment process, making it easy, quick, and safe to do business with others. Start a tribe and invite your partners to join. Then you can use the platform to collaborate with your partners, pool capital, and manage your joint investments. I'm in 12 tribes myself. It is a great way to learn from others, spread risk, and get into deals at lower minimums. Go to tribevest.com to get started today. Investing in syndications can be a daunting task. Wiring a large sum of your hard-earned money to someone you talk to on the phone for 30 minutes can certainly be scary. How can you be confident in what you're doing? Steve Sue, one of the founders of LFI, just published a book called Avoiding Rookie Errors as a Left Field Investor. 20 lessons learned from 14 years of investing in private syndications. This is by far the best book I've read on syndication investing. It's an easy-to-read book, chock full of great advice from Steve's experience as a passive investor. It is a must-read. Whether you're a first-time passive investor or a veteran, go to www.leftfieldinvestors.com/books and click on the link to Avoiding Rookie Errors as a Left Field Investor. If you are a passive investor, you got to read this book.
Well, that was a great conversation with Adam Jason from Green Coffee Company. Really interesting stuff to listen to what they've built down there, how far ahead of the curve they seem to be, having gone in 2017, started this company, was an attorney, got the entrepreneurial bug, and ended up down in Colombia helping start this company. The fact that they've grown their business model in a very different structure than what most of the coffee industry is, and they're ahead of all these other companies ever taking the risk to try to do basically a turnkey service and offer from farm to table, if you will, of coffee, the whole coffee industry. And now they're the largest producers in Colombia. I think that really shows how strong this group is and how much they've grown, how much they've figured it out. They said they had to understand the culture, the language, hire the right people, but it sounds like they've really worked through all of that. And then I love the creativity that they had to take the byproduct, the stuff they were just throwing away and needed to get rid of, dispose of, and found a way to make another revenue stream out of it by starting to build the gin and the vodka. He said that they're still kind of in the test phase and they haven't started producing it yet, but hope to have that started here in the next year or so. I think it'd be really interesting to see how that goes. Just knowing there's a low cost of entry with that because they've already got the product, and they've got the facilities. They just need to figure out how to make gin and vodka instead of coffee beans to ship out. So I thought that was really interesting to hear. And then love kind of where the business is going. The fact that he's promoting 5x returns in 2 years for investors and targeting an IPO in 2026. There's a lot of good things coming their way. It feels like, based on what he's saying, that is going to be really interesting to watch and, potentially invest in, if you will. But I liked how he talked about his hedge, his risk factors, really being the weather and how they hedge against that by purchasing more than they're producing, actually, so that they've got that flexibility that they can meet their quotas and what they need to through many different outlets, put it that way. So they're mitigating that risk along the way. But I think Adam's doing some neat stuff down there. Go check out their website, give him a call, talk to him. He'll talk to you about investing in real estate and coffee, all you want. And, hopefully leave out the toilet paper conversation. So I apologize to him for taking him down that road, but he was happy we did. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks for hanging out in the left field with us today. If you are interested in becoming a left fielder, you can find us on the World Wide Web at www.leftfieldinvestor.com and click the subscribe button to join our community. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe to the show on your podcast player so you don't miss an episode. If you really enjoyed the show, a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts would be appreciated.
This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be considered financial advice. Before making any decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Passive Investing from Left Field and Left Field Investors. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.